Hey, I'm Joe Barresi. This is my studio. It's called Jhoc, J-H-O-C. It stands for Joe's House of Compression. And let's see, I've been recording and producing records since about 1993. I moved out to California in 1988 and started freelance assisting. And a part of the reason I ended up in California is because I came out to an AES show when I was in college and studying audio, and they played Iron Maiden on the radio, and I thought, what a fantastic land this is. So I ended up packing up my bags and getting the hell out of Dodge and moving to California.
What was your first big gig?
All right, so my first big gig, well, I'll give you a bit of brief background. As an assistant, I think there's two people that were imperative in my career development. One of them was a guy named Garth Richardson, who his dad had produced the Guess Who and Alice Cooper, and Garth had done the first Rage Against the Machine record. Basically, he had been doing, even though he did the first Rage record, he'd still been producing bands and doing demos and stuff. And I was at the time freelance assisting at Sound City in Van Nuys, which I love. It's a great studio. And Garth was in there doing a demo for 3 days for free, and his normal assistant didn't want to work for free for 3 days. So I totally volunteered to work with him for a couple days. And those 3 free days of work turned into like 3 years of gigs as his engineer. We ended up doing a couple Melvins records together, L7 records, a band called Parade of Losers, a band called Surgery. There were so many records, and he's a fantastic engineer, and so I learned quite a bit from him. The other guy was a guy named Jason Casaro, who had done Madonna's Like a Virgin, Soundgarden, Super Unknown, and Power Station, and to me, he was way ahead of the game. He was creating sounds with harmonizers and detuned rooms, and if you heard the Power Station drum sound, it was just unlike anything that came out at that time. And when I was actually working at Power Station with him and just checking out the room they recorded this stuff in, I was like, where's that big room, man? You know, and he's like, what are you talking about, man? We made those sounds up with reverbs and gating and slowing down the tape machine and using the SSL cuts and doing all kinds of crazy stuff to make those sounds. So Jason Casaro was the man, and he would come out to California and hire me to help him engineer stuff. And he's the guy that really taught me that there aren't any rules in recording. You can just do what the hell you want, because the things that he was doing with distortion and chaining 4 or 5 EQs and compressors together, and in the end you're taught all these crazy things in engineering school, like, well, purity of signal path and things like that. And then I heard a vocal sound that he did, and I was like, what the hell are you running to? And he's like, that and that and that and that and that and that. I'm like, cranked EQ, this, that, going the other thing. I'm like, holy fuck, man, that sounds insane. So all the rules went out the window, and so those two guys, I think, were super important in my development as an engineer in the music business.
While we're on the subject of schools, tell me your philosophy about schools.
All right, so yeah, I went to school at the University of Miami, and my philosophy in education is I think it's important, but I also think it's up to the individual. You make of it what you want to make of it. When I went to school, we had access to a studio. It was open 24 hours a day. And I basically not only took classes all day, but I lived in that studio. And there wasn't specifically one person that said, here's how you do stuff. But the fact that I got in there and experimented was an insane education for me. And at the same time, half my friends who graduated with me never set foot in a studio. So they obviously didn't want that same aspect. Maybe they were the smart ones, because I'm working 14 hours a day, fucking losing my hair and getting fat. So maybe they got it together over there. I don't know. Anyway, my other philosophy in education is, why not learn the stuff that you really need to learn? So there are a lot of things that you can't possibly learn unless you're taught by people that actually do it for a living. So you can read all the books you want, but I always I interview kids all the time for running and assistant gigs, and I'm like, well, you have no idea what people worked on your favorite album, where they did it. You have to educate yourself. You can't just be a writer and pick up a pen and start writing. You've got to read some Shakespeare. You've got to have some history and some. So to be a musician or be a producer or whatever, you have to do the same thing. You have to study. I mean, I go home at night and I'm reading SOS magazine and checking out reviews and interviews and trying to keep current on what's going on in the state of the industry that I want to be in. So that's my education to myself post my college education.
How would you describe the state of the industry, speaking of?
The industry is like the Wild West right now, and that's how I'm going to describe it. The state of the music industry is the Wild West. You can do whatever you want. I think, what was that thing that you mentioned yesterday? And the record industry is filled with mediocre bullshit or something. Everybody's making records in their house, which is fine. I'm totally into that, but not everybody should be allowed to make records. That's what I'm going to say. And there's a lot of people out there that making shit with their inbox for a fucking dime, and I have friends myself that make great music in their bedroom, and it's killer. And then I have friends that make really bad music in their bedroom, and if they're happy doing it, I'm totally cool with it. But for me, the fact that I have my own studio is one reason that I had to. Well, first of all, I think the first change in the industry to me was Pro Tools, and I saw that I was getting paid a good amount of money to engineer a record, but then we'd have to bring in another guy and pay him a good amount of money to edit the record. So it used to be cool just to, I think Andy Johns was a famous guy that said, this is going to be a great record for you, just not a great record with you. And then they would just get rid of the drummer and bring in a guy that can play and make records. And, I've had marks all over my hands from cutting tape for many years and trying to make people sound good or sound better and stuff that we normally would do. But at some point it transitioned over into the fact that it was no longer cool to say, yeah, you suck. You look good, but you suck. So instead of spending 5 weeks on this thing, we're gonna sit there and edit every little 16th note or 32nd note instead of hiring some guy who can actually play and come in and play the record and make music. So at that point I started buying, a used Pro Tools rig, and my transition into Pro Tools was, I think, imperative because there's a lot of people I know that never made that transition, that actually, when now the budgets are lower, they can't actually afford to make records because they can't wear all the hats. And having a studio of my own, that's another hat. I'm the janitor, I'm the technician. When shit breaks, I got to go fix it. I'm the guy that cleans up and vacuums, although I have good help, and it's sort of all what we did as a runner in other studios. But now that I'm the owner, I'm also the trash guy and the organizer, whatever, the refrigerator stocker upper.
So, how would you describe your sound?
I think my sound is, I'm a guitar player, so I'm obviously attracted to guitar sounds, and people hire me to cut drums, and I still haven't figured out why, because I don't think I get great drum sounds. I just know how to manipulate them into shit that I like sounding like I like sounding. But I think my sound is pretty aggressive. I definitely wouldn't be hired to do a Streisand record or anything, because unless she wanted to have like hair come out of her throat, then she might actually hire me. I don't know. It could work. It's kind of a good look. But anyway, my sound is, I record a lot of shit up front, and then I like the extreme. I like ambience. So a lot of times when I'm tracking, I might have a lot of mics set up in a room and record some ambience as well. And I like the extreme of abrasive and lush and up front and far away. And also, I find that when I'm mixing, I'm into heavy compression to the point where everything's up front in your face, but then I ride all my dynamics back in, because obviously when everything's squeezed to death, then you lose your dynamics. But I wouldn't say I'm Joe Meek squeezed to death. More like, I don't know, I think it's a punchy sound, but at the same time, I don't really try to infuse my situation on anybody else's situation. I don't come in and say, all right, man, you played a Les Paul your whole life, you're gonna have to play this Strat. It's more about, here's these tools that I have to work with, and your sound is cool, and let me integrate some of my stuff, and then let me expose you to some other stuff, just whether it be technique like vibrato or hammer-ons or harmonics, or whether it be multiple distortion pedals or chaining some 2 or 3 amps together and blending them, then that's part of my thing. Keeps it interesting for me as well.
I noticed yesterday when Paul was playing guitar that you put a piece of rubber or some type of material.
Foam.
Do you talk a little bit about how you like to, put those kind of fine details on things? Because I think it's really important as a producer and as an engineer and as a player. that you infuse those little things that would have gone unnoticed to other people, but they really make a difference, I think.
Yeah. Some of the techniques that I have, I think, well, as far as guitar players go, is fairly obvious to me because I'm a guitar player. So watching somebody play an instrument, you can really look at how they hold their pick and how they finger a guitar, how they're fretting something, and also listening to, it's challenging doing drop tunings. Like this band is a drop tuning band, and actually the band before these guys were even lower, and it's challenging making an instrument sound translate over speakers of all sorts with a drop tuning. So some of the little things obviously is, first of all, having the right instrument. The right player is always going to make something sound good. Paul's a great guitar player, so he can pick up whatever guitar and play it and it'll sound good. But having a guitar set up properly for that tuning, having the things that they never teach you about. Okay, it's if you're in a drop C or drop C sharp or whatever, you have to use fatter strings. A fatter string doesn't vibrate as wildly, so you can keep it better in tune. Properly setting up the guitar, setting up the intonation for such tuning. Also, if you notice that we've been detuning 10 or 15 cents on the low string, because if you play a string that's that fat, also it's going to go sharp in pitch as you fret it, so it's going to be in tune, as opposed to tuning it normal and then fretting, and then it's going to be 10 or 15 cents sharp. A lot of guitars also underneath the nut and between the bridge and the tailpiece, to keep the sound tight, especially for super tight rhythms. It's great to shove. I like to shove pieces of foam underneath there so that you don't get any after ring between the bridge and the nut. Sometimes we put a napkin or pieces of tape and tape the strings off so they don't ring too.